Hi, Facebook. Happy Thursday. It's a particularly happy Thursday in our neck of the woods today, and I hope you've been outside a little bit because it is just a spectacularly glorious day. And sorry, there's a little noise coming with me. Somebody's about to start mowing their lawn. So I actually had the great benefit this morning of getting to spend half of my day in outdoor meetings, enjoying this just spectacular area on a sunny, warm day. So I hope you did too, although it did start kind of frosty around here and I pulled in the last of my tomatoes. I wanted to talk this week a little bit about something. I talked a lot during the campaign and afterwards that I'm a details person, and I think good policy comes out of paying attention to the details. And the funny thing about details is that you don't get to details if you're screaming at one another. And that's often what happens in social media. And it happens in some other political conversations where people are talking past one another and yelling their own talking points or speaking over one another. And you don't actually get to the meat of the matter and the important how to actually make good policy or come to agreement over things until you put that aside and have some empathy for somebody who disagrees with you and actively listen to what it is they're trying to say. And there are ample opportunities always, I think, for listening to those skills and using those skills, and I learn them from my kids all the time too, both in speaking to them and also what they teach me about what to listen to and different perspectives. But I had a few examples this week that sort of stood out to me on that ground. And one of them was, as I've mentioned before, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And as many of you know, I spent a fair amount of time working with Women's Support Services, a domestic violence agency. And last night, or earlier this week, Susan B. Anthony Project, which is a domestic violence and sexual assault agency based in Torrington, had their annual vigil, which was a very moving and positive experience in that they are actively helping people rebuild their lives and find strength in community, which is a really positive thing. But of course, the topic is also heartbreaking. And one of the things that I have been discussing with some of the leaders in domestic violence just recently is that sort of the abuser in a domestic violence situation is often the financially or socially dominant partner, and they scream out the other using the judicial system, sometimes using financial control, all kinds of ways to trap the victim in isolation, socially, financially, all kinds of ways. And we were all reminded at the ends of these visuals to be active participants, in helping those we love, and paying attention to those details, not just letting the noisy half of a partnership decide how things are, but paying attention to the signs from someone else and see whether they could use help and a hand outreached, and get beyond that noise and try to help them both, get them in contact with the agencies in our state which do terrific work on behalf of victims, and to help them speak up for themselves, because it's quite hard. Another example this week on a different note was I had my an event in North Canaan earlier this week on the just exorbitantly rising prices of generic drugs. And that's another situation where we could all just sort of exclaim about how high prices are and how unaffordable it all is, or you could take a moment and try to figure out why that is. And we had Attorney General Tong with us and Representative Sean Scanlon from Guilford with us, both leaders in this area. Tong in litigation with 49 other attorneys general about investigating why it is that originally the generic drug market was set up as a way to, once patents had expired on medications, for prices to go down, for people to get access to lower priced medication. And it turns out that's not what happened. Instead, we had companies colluding with one another to control the marketplace and raise prices, sometimes really exorbitantly. And we heard a lot of stories. And that's another, listening. I heard from a lot of people, particularly people who weren't able to make it to the event, who reached out to me and gave me their stories of just exorbitantly rising prices. And why is that? It's not the way it was supposed to work out. Another way, an important approach to this is getting information. We have passed legislation recently that for the first time will force the pharmaceutical industry to explain when they raise a price. And if there is a really good reason behind it, fine, then we'll understand what it is. But you can't just do it behind closed doors because it has a massive public health effect. And not only does it make it medications unaffordable for people, that affects all of us because it increases the cost of public health care systems that we all pay for, and it increases medical situations that we all end up paying for. So it's really important, again, to pay attention to the details and understand why things didn't go the way that we expected them to go, and then follow through and make a change. As I mentioned, this morning, my outdoor meeting this morning had to do with railroad spraying, which has affected numerous towns in our region. And this morning we met in Cornwall with 4 first selectmen from affected towns, people affected by the spraying, and representatives from the Department of Transportation and the railroads and their vendors. And everybody had different perspectives and probably different explanations for why this was happening. But the value of us all being in one room, going around a table, listening to one another, and then walking out and looking at the actual situation cannot be overstated. It's really important for us to sit down together, explain where we're coming from, all of our independent understandings of this. I think it was a really constructive meeting, and I think there will be there will for sure be some important follow-up that I think will help everybody. Another thing that came out of the railroad meeting was just basically the importance of communication, because there have been some hang-ups, especially given the multiple parties involved, with people not feeling heard. And when you try to reach out to a government agency or somebody working on behalf of the government and you don't get a response, that's really frustrating. And you start to wonder what's going on. And so I think improved communication can make a really big difference. Another, on the communication front, there have been several articles recently about, again, back to social media and unhealthy communication. And in particular, violent and offensive language on social media directed at local officials, elected officials, or people running for office now. And there have been news reports about particularly people in other parts of the state, but it's happening in our part of the state too. I have spoken to a number of elected officials, both paid and volunteer, who are trying to do work for their communities, and this is not a particular. It has affected people from both parties who are just trying to do the work that they're doing, and the level of abuse and sometimes violence, threats of violence on social media is really hard to deal with. It has been my incredible privilege to get to know the local elected leaders in the 9 towns that I cover, and they are working hard on behalf of all of us. And that doesn't mean that we all can't learn from people who have different perspectives and try to make sure that we're caring for everyone. But screaming about it on social media and threatening to beat someone up is really not a great way to go about it. So the election is coming up, local elections on November 5th. So first of all, I hope you're planning on voting. We need everyone to get out there and vote and make them exercise their civil right. I have gotten to do some door knocking in Kent and Torrington recently with candidates running for office, and that's been fun. As you know, I actually like to knock on people's doors, and this time around is particularly fun when I'm not running for office. So love to talk to those of you that I got to see on your doorstep recently. So there are events. There are so many events that I'm probably going to cover them in my newsletter. I did note when I was writing them up that I hit every town in the last week except Norfolk. I'm sorry, Norfolk. But I did bring the governor to Norfolk last week, so I feel like maybe I can make it up to you next week. So I'll describe those in the newsletter. There were a lot of great events of all varieties. Tonight, just in case you're a couple things that I'm going to go to, there's an event for Ed Advance is having an event for BASES. That's an acronym which stands for Before and After School Enrichment Services. That's at Vogel Wetmore in Torrington tonight, starting at 4:30. It's an open house celebrating the many enrichment activities that they have made available to those in our community, and how important those are for all of us. So if you're in that area, please stop by. And tonight also there will be an airing of the film Uprooting Addiction, which I've mentioned before. That is made by a local filmmaker, Tori Estern Jadow, and it's about addiction in the Northwest corner, and particularly an approach to addiction which deals with the underlying trauma behind addiction and adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs as they're sometimes described. And if you can make it to that, it's a 6:30 showing at the Warner. I will be there to see that as well. A couple of other there again, so many upcoming events, but I just wanted to highlight two. There's a fundraiser in Kent for affordable housing on Friday. Tomorrow, Friday night. I'll give details in the newsletter. And if you're in Salisbury, the Salisbury Democratic Town Committee is having a candidate meet and greet at the Grove on Sunday. And next time I come to you, it will be Halloween. So I hope you've all figured out what your costumes are going to be. I'm thinking I might reprise my costume from last year because I kind of liked it. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of Halloween-related things that, again, I'll provide more detail in the newsletter. So for some kids, Halloween can be challenging if kids facing particular conditions. So there are two things that people have to try to help those kids. Two things that I want to highlight. One is called Blue Pumpkins for Autism. If you see a child with a blue pumpkin trick-or-treating, be on or a sticker on them that says "I'm autistic," be aware that for that child, addressing you and saying trick or treat or something like that is a much bigger challenge than it is for other kids. So take a little extra care, pay attention, give them a little extra time. They're trying, and it's just, for some kids it's harder. And then there's teal pumpkins for allergies. So if you are offering at your house non-food Halloween gifts or toys, pencils, stickers, glow sticks, markers, put a teal pumpkin out, and that helps kids who are dealing with serious food allergies know that they have safety there and that they don't have to worry so much. So trying to help out kids who experience Halloween a little differently than everybody else. And I hope your last week before Halloween goes well, and have a great weekend. Bye.